prosperity fund. It's a very lengthy sort of disclaimer and introduction. As Sally and Nikki have said, if everyone can make sure they're on mute, know how to use the chat bar. If you put all your questions in there, we are quite constrained on time. This is only a 3-hour session. So I will answer as many questions as possible at the end, and any other questions will be taken from the transcript of the meeting notes and will be sent to you via email after the event if we don't get to them or they require a bit more investigation on my part. The questions and answers part of this session will not be recorded, so please feel free to ask anything you want at that point without any sort of worries about what people are going to think or anything like that. It's always awful to be the first person asking a question. The slides will be made available to you in full after this session as well, so that you'll have a copy of those. And as Nikki and Sally have said, if you can keep yourself on pause, on mute rather, then that saves any feedback, dogs barking in the background, phones ringing, postman, that sort of thing, interrupting it and ruining it for anyone else. First question in there from Julia: will the recording be shared with us? The slides will be shared with you. I'm not sure whether the recording will be or not, but Sally will be able to let you, and Nikki will be able to let you know that at the end. So I will ask them to check that, and then they can feed that back in the chat for you. So, okay, Sally's just answered. It will be put up online on the YouTube channel. It's just getting everything sorted through the council. So I'm going to introduce myself to start off with, so you know who I am and why I'm the person here giving you this talk. So my name's Jo Reynolds. I'm a chartered marketeer. I'm also a chartered business consultant, and I've owned my own business for nearly 9 years now. Actually, been 9 years in May. I'm also the president of Yeovil and District Chamber, which is a CIC. So I've set up multiple CICs and multiple limited companies, both for myself and for clients as well. I'm also a qualified trainer and a mentor as well. So hopefully I've got enough all-round knowledge that's going to answer most of your questions and get rid of any sort of fears or trepidation that you have about setting up your company. Now, I appreciate that we have a mix of people in the room. Some of you might be setting up limited companies. Some of you might be looking at CICs. Some of you at the end of this might decide to do something totally different. That's absolutely fine. This session is going to cover limited companies and CICs only, and we're going to look in equal depth at both of them. So I do appreciate that some of this might not be entirely relevant to you all the way along, but hopefully we'll give you a flavour for businesses in general. So what we're going to cover is we're going to look at the different types of legal entity, the two that I've mentioned in detail, how you register a company and how you consider which legal entity is right for you and your business. We're going to look at how you choose a name and a brand for your company as well. So what are the implications of getting it right and wrong, how it can affect customer perceptions, and how you check the availability of names and domains for both CICs and limited companies, because they are subtly different. We're then also going to talk about, once you've got your business running, how you reach your audience. Again, different strategies depending on the types of business that you're looking at. And we're going to look very, very briefly at the end about protecting your intellectual property, because there's nothing worse than when you've come up with a great idea, set up your company, for someone to come along and nick your idea. Okay, so we're just going to give a very brief overview on how you can protect it at the end. So the place that we should all start when we're looking at a business or setting up a business or a CIC is, what are your plans so far? What are you planning to do? Where are you planning to do it and why? When and with whom? Now, these might seem like really common sense questions to ask, and you probably go, well, I've done all that. But the when is incredibly important if you're setting up a CIC. A limited company can be set up in less than half an hour. A CIC could take you 3 months. So that could affect how you choose to set up your business. It's also important to consider what experience you have in the area of your business, but also in the operational part of your business, because the requirements for a CIC are significantly greater than that for a limited company, and we'll go through those as well. And it also depends on what you're hoping to achieve. Are you looking at something that's very community minded? Are you looking at something that's focused on making a profit? Those sorts of questions. So these are really important questions to ask yourself before you start, but to keep asking yourself at regular intervals throughout your business journey. Some business coaches that I've worked with in the past suggest that on the first of every month you ask these questions again, just to check that you remain on track. It's entirely up to you, but they are important. And if you haven't already asked them of yourself, then ask them now. So firstly, what do we mean by a legal entity? So a legal entity is the format on how we set up our company, whether we're self-employed sole trader, whether we're a limited company, third sector CIC or CIO, whether we're an LLP, a public limited company. There's about 18 different types of company legal entity, and they all have different implications and different accounting responsibilities. Limited companies are the most common, and self-employed. CICs, community interest companies, for those of you that are setting up limited companies and don't know what a CIC is, are a bit different again. So legal entities, companies, can enter into contracts and assume the obligations of those contracts. And having a company, as opposed to being self-employed or a sole trader, can offer protection to you, the business owner, but only in part, and again, depending on which entity that you set up as. So we're going to look a little bit now at CICs. So a CIC, or community interest company, is a special type of business. Think of it as a specialized form of a limited company where its primary focus is on social impact over profit. Essentially, it's got a built-in commitment to make a positive impact, positive difference on a community or a subset of the community, or for a group of things. So RSPCA, a lot of charities and animal welfare bits start off as CICs because the obligation of a CIC is less than that of a full-blown charity. The heart of the CIC lies in its purpose, and that's to ensure that the business conducts itself in a way that benefits these causes. It isn't just a tagline, it's an ethos, and it has to be ingrained in every aspect of your CIC. So we're going to have a look at some of how this purpose shapes the features of a CIC and separates them from other types of business. One outstanding feature is the asset lock, and this isn't a metaphorical term. It's a legal mechanism that ensures that company assets are dedicated to community benefit. So in simpler terms, it prevents assets from being used for private gain and reinforces the commitment to the community welfare. So if you set up a CIC that's largely asset-based, largely office-based, and you buy 10 computers, and then you decide that you've had enough of your CIC and you end your CIC, you can't keep those 10 computers because they are an asset of the CIC. They have to be asset locked. And that means that you, for example, could donate them at the end or bequeath them to another CIC or another good cause. So a lot of CICs will name a second CIC, a local CIC, as their asset lock beneficiary, or they give them to children's charities or animal charities or something like that. So it's all about making sure that you can't set up a CIC, get loads and loads of grant money, buy loads and loads of computers, close your CIC and keep all the computers for yourself. It's about that social responsibility. And being asset locked scares a lot of people, but actually it's a really good badge of honour. It proves, if you like, that you're in it for the right reasons. So it's not just about this choice of structure, it's about the choice that comes with it and the opportunities that it opens up into for you. And some of those can be funding, and some of them can be about donations and so forth. However, they do come with a set of constraints and a set of legal requirements. So we need to understand this and make sure we get it right. Setting up a CIC is not easy. The last CIC I set up took me 6 months. because of making sure that we had all the memorandums and the articles of association there, that the community interest test had been fulfilled fully, that the committee and the directors and everyone else was on board with the whole vision. So the community interest test is pivotal, and it ensures that the CIC genuinely benefits the community. It means that you need to go through the application process and you need to justify why you should be a CIC. It's not like a limited company. You can go on Companies House and just go, I'm going to set that up, and you pay over about £100 and it's set up. You have to prove this, and it has to be approved by a board at Companies House. The application process itself is not difficult. However, you have to be prepared to answer the questions and be prepared to back them up if challenged with fact. You can go on the government website and you can download the form, so you can prep. You don't have to do it, and it isn't in one fell swoop. And if you do it and it comes back saying that you failed, that's not it. You get a chance to resubmit. So, for example, for the CIC I set up, that was quite a very complex one for a whole county, it took 6 attempts to make sure that our legal framework and our community interest test was absolutely robust, that we had all the policies together. It also will be rejected if you have a single typo in your document. So please do check that, because I had it rejected twice because I spelt one name wrong, and that was a bit embarrassing, quite frankly. So make sure you double check it and go through it. So the legal process that you need to go through is you need to have a memorandum and articles of association. When you register, you can just download the Charities Commission ones and adapt them as needed. Okay, so the foundation documents, these outline the company's objectives, its structure and your regulations. And for a CIC, these aren't just bureaucratic necessities. They serve as the compass that guides your company's commitment to community benefit. The memorandum sets out the company's mission and clearly states that the articles and activities are to be carried out for the benefit of the community. The articles of association, on the other hand, detail the internal rules governing the company. So it's worth getting those agreed with your board, if you have one, straight away. Now, it is important as well that when you're setting up a CIC, that you have more than one person as a director. Again, if you are going in it with one director, you will be rejected on your application. My personal recommendation is go for an odd number, 3, 5, 7, because when it comes to voting, you have an odd number, which means that you aren't sat there with a tied vote. Now, I mentioned previously about the community interest test, and this isn't just a formality, it's the crucial next step that ensures that you are serving the community. And this is the bit that you will probably be judged on most in your application. It tests whether your activities are directed towards benefiting you or benefiting the community, and whether any profits generated will be reinvested into the company. Now, a lot of people shy away from CICs thinking that you can't take a wage, you can't be paid, and you can't pay subcontractors. You absolutely can. You just have to prove that you are doing it correctly. You have to be transparent with your reasoning and your procurement process. And you have to say that any surplus, you have to be really clear on where that's going to go. The ethos of a community interest company, a CIC, is that it goes back and it's reinvested to do more good. So that should be the premise you start with. Passing this test is fundamental, and if you don't pass this test, you will not be granted CIC status. Again, with the asset lock, defining that in full with the full details. It's not sufficient to say, I will pass on everything to a children's charity. You have to specify the children's charity, their charity number if they have one, or CI or legal status, their community benefits as well. You can't just put something token in that asset lock. You have to be very specific with their business number if possible and why they are going to get it. So you can't just say, I'm going to give it to ABC funds. You have to say, I'm going to do this because they share the same ethos as us, the same values, the same moral compass, they're serving the same community, whatever it happens to be. It has to be specific. And then the application process itself is taking all this information that you've built in this business plan and inputting it. And I would suggest you do it online on the Register of Companies. You can do an offline version if you want to, and you can print those documents. And I suggest you do so ahead of time, save it as a Word document, fill it in. And then when you come to fill in the online version, you copy and paste. It costs £23 to do it online, and it costs £35 to do it on paper. If you do it online and it fails the test, your £23 goes back to your bank and you have to start again. Okay, you can't just pick up your old one and amend it. You have to start the process from scratch again. So that can be quite annoying, quite frankly. So it is important to have it written on Word, because when it gets rejected the first time and you realise you haven't written it all out in Word, you remember to do it the second time. Okay, so lesson from someone who learnt that one the hard way. Make sure that you've got a digital version of this. And throughout this, you should be making sure that you are talking about the genuine commitment that your company has for community benefit. Okay, at every single aspect of it should be shouting, we're here for the community. So, but establishing your CIC is just the beginning. Once you have that CIC status, you've got a lot of requirements on you, including annual filings, reporting requirements, adherence to regulations, and some of those will vary depending on the type of CIC or the sector that you're working in. There might be safeguarding if it's children or vulnerable adults. If you're looking at something that's a CIC that's offering financial services, you might be regulated by the financial conducts industry and so forth. So you need to look in more depth about any sector specific ongoing obligations. But to be a CIC, you are going to need to have annual filings that are checked by an accountant. You're going to have to report them either annually or quarterly. And again, if you're VAT registered, then that could change the duration. And you need to absolutely make sure that you are sticking to what you said you're going to do in your memorandum and your articles of association, because that's what you will be tested against if you are ever called up for an audit. We're going to look into these bits in a bit more detail in a minute, okay? So let's flip over now to limited companies. So a limited company is chosen by the majority of businesses in the UK because unlike being self-employed or sole proprietor, it separates the liability of your company from you as an individual. So when I set up my company 9 years ago, nearly, I was very, very conscious that this was my first business and that I was perfectly capable of messing it up totally. And for me, limited company was the only consideration for me because I didn't want to be self-employed. If I made a mistake in marketing or business consultancy as a self-employed person and someone sued me, they could take away my personal car, my television, my sofa, my kids' PlayStations, Xboxes, etc. As a limited company, you have a level of protection between you, the business, and you, the individual. You still have director's liability, so you are still culpable, but it offers a different level of protection because a limited company is doing the work, not you, even though you work as an employee for that limited company. So, as it says here, it extends beyond individual interest. It is easier for accounting, I believe, than being a sole trader, where you quite often people just pay into their normal bank account that the mortgage and the car loans and everything else goes out of. It allows you to know what your business is doing. The other advantage of having a limited company over being sole trader is if you make a success of it, you have an entity. If you imagine your company is like a box, you've got something you can sell. Whereas if you're a sole trader, you can't sell a sole trader company because it's not a company. You are the company. So when you decide that you've had enough or you retire or whatever, you cannot sell a sole trader business. You can sell your client list. You can sell your computers. You can sell your office, your cars, your vehicles, whatever you've got. but you can't legitimately sell a business because a business does not exist. So this is an important consideration when you're looking at where you want to be in the future and what you want to do at the end of it. So limited companies come with a set of key features that distinguish them. The limited liability, which is the shield that I've just spoken about, but also the perpetual existence that I've spoken about and the changes in ownership. Okay, these can be benefits if you're looking at moving forward. Now, similarly with the CIC, you can change your director, so you can pass responsibility of that CIC across as well. Okay. The legal requirements on a limited company are less than a CIC and more than a sole trader. So it's a middle ground, if you like. So you need to register it on Companies House, and you can use different ways of doing that. And we'll look at that in a bit later on. Okay, and you have got the same requirement to have a memorandum and articles of association, which are pretty standard in the UK, and you just tweak them. You look at having accountability. So depending on whether you're VAT registered or what your turnover is going to be, depends on your requirement for accounting. And you will pay corporation tax. Okay, so tax confuses everybody. So very, very briefly, corporation tax is your tax on your business. PAYE is your tax on your earnings, and VAT is your tax on stuff. Okay, be that a service or a product. And those three things exist in both CICs and limited companies, depending on your turnover. Corporation tax is currently about 20% of everything of your profit. Okay, VAT obviously is likely to change in the April budget, so we won't talk too much about that because by the time you've set up, these figures will have changed. But it's not onerous. A limited company has also a requirement every year for you to complete a confirmation statement, which costs you the princely total of £13 and takes about 2 seconds to do on the government website. And it basically asks you to log in with your UTR number and say, has anything changed? Yes or no. And if you click no, that's it done. You pay your £13 and they're happy again for another 12 months. If you miss doing that, you get a £100 fine. So make sure you have a diary note to do it at least 2 weeks before your renewal date. So just to compare the two, legal structure, social enterprise structure with a commitment to community liability, limited company has separate legal entities and it limits your liability. You have an asset lock for a CIC, but not for a limited company, which means you have more flexibility in your assets, meaning you can sell them if you need to without having to get permission to do so. Ownership of a CIC, although you will have a board of directors, it is based on a community focused ownership. So you will have a legal ownership, but again, it's looking at that asset lock and that kind of like what happens when you're not there type question. Whereas a limited company, you have shareholders and it is driven ownership. Some pros and cons. CICs, the pros: community impact, increased credibility, eligibility for grants. That is a really big reason that people set up CICs, is because it does open up other funding avenues for you. Cons: you can't distribute the profit in the same way, and you've got some quite complex compliance to consider. Limited companies basically flip it. You are still eligible for some grants, but less. You have easier profit distribution, but the perception is quite often that you're in it just for the money as opposed to having that social impact. The nature of your business may also impact on which you choose. So CICs are ideal for community-centric, social-driven enterprises. Limited companies, with when profit is in mind, need to be your primary goal. And then you've got some long-term vision there. So sustainability and scalability are maybe the two differentiators between the two entities. So how do you decide, with all that information that I've just dumped on you in like 35 minutes, how do you decide what to do? So you need to ask yourself, what is your primary mission for your business? How do you envisage prospect distribution, and do you envisage having a community impact? And probably the most important question is, what level of flexibility and compliance can you and your business handle? Because you can be a limited company with a social value. You can set up as a limited company and say, I'm going to give away profits, I'm going to make large charitable donations. But you don't have to. And perception-wise, a lot of people feel that a CIC is a safer bet for investment. So as I said right at the beginning, I've got a limited company that I run, which is my business consultancy and marketing company. And I also am the president of a CIC, which is the Chamber of Commerce here in Yeovil. And the reason we transitioned to a CIC last year was because it opened up a door for us as a Chamber of Commerce to deliver a social impact and social value programme for some of the corporate companies and other limited companies in the region. It also means that we can look at a different type of funding for something that is basically a volunteer-led business. So a Chamber of Commerce is absolutely driven by the community and by the businesses, and all our decision making is around that. We are all volunteers, no one gets paid, and every pound and pence that we make is invested back into delivering something else. So a CIC is a perfect fit for a Chamber of Commerce. My own business as a business consultant and marketing consultant is to make a profit, so that I can go fishing, I can go and watch the cricket, I can have nice holidays and all the things that we want to do. I would not be legitimate in saying that that business was a CIC. I can work for my community, I can price so that I'm accessible to businesses, I can donate to charities and sponsor other things within the town through my limited company. But I am profit driven. I have bills, I have expenses, I have staff. I am a limited company. So the two distinctions are really come down to what is that mission and what can you handle reporting wise. Clear as mud now, isn't it? So we'll get into the fun stuff now. Financial planning. Okay. In a CIC, your income generation is likely to come through grant funding, donations, or social investments. It could come from selling services or product, but it is most likely to come from grant funding. And as I've said, it's one of the main reasons that people set up as a CIC is to have access to those grants. The National Lottery funding, for example, has very specific funds available only to CICs, CIOs and other third sector social enterprises. Similarly, the Ministry of Defence and the government also have very specific pots of money that can only go to third sector businesses. I can't access those through my limited company. I can't even access them through the Chamber of Commerce and then pay them to my limited company because of this asset lock. So it protects that money being taken and used incorrectly as well. And that's a really key distinction for CICs. And it's why CICs are becoming more popular with for corporate businesses to work with. Financial planning is about reinvestment. It's about that community-driven budgeting. So it's about what can you do to help. And your tax implications we've kind of had a look at. But they are, again, around community-orientated activities. So you can be VAT registered as a CIC. The same rules apply. For a limited company, you're looking at balancing your debt and your equity, so your profit and loss and your balance sheet. You have to have a board of directors or a single director or shareholders to decide on dividends, retained earnings. If you decide to keep money in the business and put an accrual through because you know you're going to be paying for new equipment, that all has to follow a set purpose and a set of guidelines to make sure it's done correctly. Otherwise, it's very easy for me to just say, oh, do you know what? I'm going to pay myself an extra 10 grand, but I'm not going to put it through payroll. Then I don't have to pay PAYE. You can't hide and you shouldn't hide because the implications of doing so and getting found out are huge. You must understand your corporation tax obligations. Whenever your year end is, mine's at the end of May, I have to submit my accounts. This isn't just my personal self-assessment, this is my company accounts within 9 months, and I have to pay my corporation tax within 9 months. So I'm married to an accountant, so it's very easy for me. It's brilliant. I get him to do mine in June. We pay everything up. I don't have to worry. So all these people that are panicking this week because it's the end of January and they haven't done their self-assessments and they haven't done their corporation tax, I get to feel a little bit smug about, because actually I did mine in June. And I would suggest, if you set up that way, you keep your accounts running and you check it every month, because it's the best way to make sure that you don't suddenly get whacked with a huge bill because all of a sudden you make a profit and you're being charged for that. But it's considerations in your financial planning. Make sure that you account for the money you're going to have to pay HMRC at the end of each year. And similarly with the CIC, make sure you account for your contingency and what are you going to do with that profit at the end of that quarter, 6 months or year. One of the biggest problems for companies, CICs or limited companies, believe it or not, is profit. Because you've either, with a CIC, you've got to work out where it goes community driven. With a limited company, you've got to work out how much you've got to pay and keep in the bank for HMRC. So funding and income generation, CICs, they rely on typically on diverse sources of income, grants, donations, social investments, and so forth. So this is just going into those a little bit more detail for you, so that when you get the slides, you understand a little bit more about what I've said. Compliance is your biggest issue with a CIC, and making sure that you employ an accountant or a bookkeeper who can do that for you. So many people employ a bookkeeper rather than an accountant, get them to do the day-to-day stuff, and then quite often that bookkeeper has a relationship with a good accountancy firm who will do your end of year for you and make sure that you're fully compliant. Limited company, again, a bit more detail about what we've just discussed for you. Okay. The key thing to notice on this is about this profit distribution. You have to have those formal meetings about dividends. So I'm the sole director of my company. I still have to produce paperwork every single time I pay a dividend. And every single month I have to have a directors meeting, which is quite short. It's normally just me, because it is just me. And I have to fill in a piece of paper to say that I've actually done it online. And if I'm audited, they will ask to see copies, dated and physically with a pen signed copies of those pieces of paper, to show that I've considered the implication of taking a pay rise, a profit, a dividend, or anything like that. So be aware of that, because there aren't shortcuts around that. So as I mentioned, I run a marketing company, so I'm married to an accountant, so we've done the boring bit now, the bit that normally is at the key of why people choose CICs or limited companies. And now we're going to look at marketing strategies. So if we understand from what we've already discussed that you are a social enterprise, you are a CIC, you are a community interest company, emphasis on community, the key thing for you to remember in your marketing and when you reach out to your customers is that you understand that community need and you have stakeholders. So this is really key, that you, for us as a Chamber of Commerce, we work really closely with lots of different industry sectors, aerospace here in Yeovil being a huge one for us, but also we work with our schools and colleges to understand skills development. So we have stakeholders, quite a complex network of about 38 different stakeholders we work with. And that's to pull in that intel all the time and make sure that everything we are putting out there as services, products, events, networking actually hits the spot and is relevant. So CICs need to be really in tune with the community and the other businesses in their area. Limited companies need to understand their customers. Again, they need to understand their competitors as well and who's going to be competing against them for these pots of customers. But it's a different mindset. Your messaging for a CIC is all about that community and that social impact. It's a limited company. It's all about selling the values of your product or service. It's not about, don't get caught up in pricing. It's about value. You can be the most expensive if you offer the best quality and value. That's absolutely fine. Think Poundland versus Marks and Spencer's, for example. Both have a place on the market. Both of them do it incredibly well because of the messages they send out. With a limited company, you are looking at almost competing and fighting for this pot of customers. With a CIC, you are looking at largely giving something to a large or small group of people, and it's all about that community. So it's a softer message. With your channels as a CIC, you will use events, you'll use partnerships, you'll use social media, of course, but you will use this network that you build, your stakeholder network, to be advocates for you. And with the limited company, you're going to look at a lot more traditional marketing depending on your sector. So digital advertising, billboards, buses, sign writing, events and so forth as well will all come into it. And there's a big crossover, but it's done in a different way. Branding your CIC or limited company also is really important. We're going to have a look at this after we have a coffee break in a little bit. We're going to have a look at how you name your company and some of the checks you should do before you do that. So I'm not going to spend loads and loads of time on here, but suffice to say your most important parts of it are your identity, so that it reflects what you do, your storytelling, because people buy stories rather than just logos, and being consistent with it. As a marketer, nothing upsets me more than going through someone's website and social media and seeing 17 different versions of a logo or a picture or a message or different spellings of people's names. Consistency is really important. If you're a CIC, it's essential, because if you are audited as a CIC and you are not consistent across everything, you could be challenged on it. Limited company, it's just bad practice. But with a CIC, it is fundamental, because you filled in that memorandum of association and your articles of association with a specific name, with a specific title, and with a specific purpose. And that must be maintained through everything you do. Of course, once you've set it up, you've got other sorts of challenges and solutions. So looking at your community needs and managing those is about making sure you have a robust engagement strategy, that you are part of that community. And I would think for the majority of people, you don't go into setting up a CIC if you haven't already got this network or this structure around you. It's about team building, it's about shared values, and it's about community passion. And I would say the two words on this slide that mean the most are shared values, community passion. And that's at the heart of every CIC. You also need to be dedicated to the mission that you're on. And when you're building your team, whether it's an internal team or an external team, you need people who share that vision, that passion, who are on the same path as you, who want to get to the end. My caution, given my experience, is don't fall for people who are looking at it as a badge of honour, who want the vanity part of being part of a CIC. It's really important they share what you're doing. They don't just want to be able to say, oh, and aren't I great? I'm on the board of a CIC or charity as well. Because there's a lot of people like that. So your recruitment strategy for your team is every bit as important to get a team of volunteers, if you're not paying them for your CIC, as it is for getting paid staff for your limited company. In fact, it's probably more so, because these people are likely to be giving their time to you for nothing because they believe in this cause, which means you need to make sure that they can cope with the workload that you're going to ask them to do, that they are happy to go out and talk to people and be ambassadors for you. But you also need to make sure that they are fully versed on the requirements of a CIC and the obligations of a CIC, so that they can make decisions with that governance and with the legal obligations in mind. One of the big problems that a lot of CICs find is they've got this pot of money that they've got from a grant and they don't know how to distribute it. So someone comes to them and says, we want a new children's play area, or we want this, or we want that. And they go, yeah, go on then. But they don't do the right checks. They just feel like it's a good thing to do. As a CIC, you need to be showing that your decision-making process is sound, so that there's no bias, no question that anything untoward is happening. And that starts from your team. So making sure that you have the right people in your corner is really important. For a limited company, you have similar challenges. So one of your biggest challenges is maximising your profitability. It's navigating a competitive market, and it's making sure you've got the right amount of resources behind you to do this effectively. So quite a lot of companies that come to me for consultancy say, I need to double my I want to double my profit. There's lots of ways you can double profit. You can double your turnover. Therefore, you should be making twice as much profit if your costs stay the same. You could halve your costs and therefore double your profit. You could do a combination of the both. You could expand. You could actually shrink to increase your profitability. And all of these should be done whilst considering how you remain competitive against your competition, against the other companies in your town, county, region, country, sector that are doing the same thing. So it's really important that you start by investigating not just your potential customers and knowing your product or service inside out, but by really looking at the competition and saying, what do they do really, really well? What do they do not so well? So you know not just what to aim for, but what to avoid. And then through all of this, you need to make sure that you've got efficient resource allocation, that you've implemented cost-effective operational processes. So you do need to have your green policy, your procurement policy, your health and safety, your equality and diversity. All this big pack of policies are really, really important. And if you are employing staff as well, I would recommend you speak to a HR professional who can give you this pack and teach you how to use it correctly. Your market research for both limited companies and CICs is your strength, but you'll be looking at different things. So you'll be looking at how many competitors have you got for one, and you'll be looking at how many beneficiaries potentially could you have for the other. Again, your team is really, really important. But in a limited company, you're governed by HR law in a slightly different way, subtly different to a CIC. So you look for skill sets. You will still look potentially for the right person, but you're looking at skills here because you're looking at maximising your profitability. And you will establish a hierarchical structure for the majority of businesses. You're still required to be transparent through your decision-making process, but you will have a hierarchy that is understood and a leadership team potentially as you grow. So for a limited company, the challenges once you're set up are vast, but subtly different. And they focus on giving out the best service or product at the minimal cost to make the maximum profit. Whereas a CIC, as we've said, is looking at delivering the maximum benefit most efficiently back into a community. Okay, so we've gone through that quite quickly, actually, which is probably because Sally said to me, don't ramble too much, Jo, because normally I overrun on these sessions by loads. So we are at the point for a break. So the recording will be stopped in a minute. We're going to take 10 minutes, just over 10 minutes. We'll come back at 10:30, please. In that time, can you think if there's any questions you want to put in the chat? Please just put them into the chat, because at this rate, we're going to have a good session at the end for questions and answers. And I want to make sure that we've got as many questions in there as possible to help you as a group. So if you've got any questions there, we'll answer them at the end. But go and have a quick coffee, a comfort break, let the dog out, whatever it is you need to do, and come back at 10:30, please. And that's good as well. However, considering everything that we've talked about with the differences between CICs and limited companies, you should also consider what message you're trying to give. So in your CIC, you might want to use the words community. You might want to use the name of your town or village or district or wherever you are geographically setting up. You might want to use the beneficiaries. So it's a children's or pets or whatever. And one of the things to consider is, should you include your name? With a CIC, I would say that's increasingly a no, because it ties it to you as a person. So also consider this transferability. So as I was just saying, with the CIC passing on, it makes it easier to pass on with that social enterprise. It's about the community, it's not about you. But with your limited company, you might absolutely want it to have your name in there. It might become a legacy, or it might be someone else's name. It might be someone who meant a great deal to you, your mentor, your grandfather, or something like that, that means something to you. But consider, when you include a name, if you are doing it for a limited company, how likely are people to buy that if your intention at the end is to sell it? One of the first things when I'm setting up companies with clients that I ask them about is, what's going to happen when you get rid of it? What do you want to do at the end? And they're like, well, we haven't even started yet. But it makes a big difference, because if I called myself Joe Reynolds Marketing and I got my company to £500,000 turnover or £1 million turnover or whatever, and then I went, right, I'm retiring now. Who wants to buy Joe Reynolds Marketing unless they're also called Joe Reynolds, which is going to be a really small customer base for me? You know, are they going to want to call it JR Marketing or something like that? So for me, I didn't want to include my name. The other issue I had when I set up my company nearly 9 years ago was I was trying to be too clever. So it was a marketing company, and I was thinking of things like 4Ps marketing or SPF marketing and things like this, all sorts of acronyms that are marketing terms. The only people that would understand that in my company name are other marketeers. They're not my blooming customers, they're my competitors. So I'm not naming it for them. So you need to think about who you are talking to as well. When you're setting up a CIC, this is really, it's really important for both types of business, but for a CIC, it's also really important because you need to get that kind of warm and fuzzy about the business, about your CIC, if you want people to donate and engage and so forth. With a limited company, you can be a little bit clever. I'm going to show you on the next slide some people who were a little bit too clever and arguably not clever enough. Okay, so have a look at these names and I will watch the screen for the laughing faces coming up. There's some really, this Selfridges guy in the middle, he really thought he was being clever with that, didn't he? White goods seller calling himself Selfridges. I don't know. The butcher's family funeral home, that makes me laugh. I'm not going to even go into the middle one. You're all grown-ups. But punctuation's important is all I'm going to say. And yeah, the top one, meh construction, MEH construction. So that this company genuinely exists, and those are the initials of the 3 directors. The problem is meh has now become a couldn't care less kind of acronym, hasn't it? Ugh, they just can't be bothered. Do you want your property, your house built by somebody who's meh, they're all right. So consider what it says. So those are quite good examples of where it's perhaps not quite been named right. There's kind of a bit of a naming checklist that you can go through. And I kind of go like, if it makes you smile, it's really good. So if it's suggestive, if it's meaningful, if your customers get it, that is the most important bit. Can it invoke images? So if you all shut your eyes and I say Domino's pizza, you can all go, okay, it's red and it's blue and it's white. And you'll know that it's a domino. Some of you will be able to tell me how many spots are on its logo, but you'll all think of pizza because it does what it says on the tin. Okay. Has it got legs? Now, what I mean by that is, can you extend it? So when I started this company, it was Justelle Limited because it was a result of being made redundant. I didn't know what I was going to do. I wanted to keep it deliberately vague. I didn't know where I was going with it. Then as I found my niche and I found my customer base, I added in the marketing and media bit so that it had that run sale effect. Now, what I did inadvertently at that time is I clipped the wings. I took some of the legs away from that business because Justelle Marketing and Media don't do accountancy. But if I wanted to do accountancy during lockdown, when, you know, times were tough, my husband was furloughed and all the rest of it, if I'd said, well, come on, let's do bookkeeping as well, it would have been really confusing for customers to do it under that same logo, under that same name, under that same brand, which is why I've got the second business, which is Better Business Coaching, because that one does what it says as well. So consider when you're naming, are you likely to grow in other directions, and can it work? Now, if you want to change your business name on Companies House as a limited company, it only costs you £10 to do it. Okay, and then it's the cost of changing your domain names, your emails, your logos, your sign writing, all the rest of it. But to legally change your name only costs you £10 on Companies House. Okay, it's all the other costs that go with it. Alternatively, you could set up a second limited company. So I could have Justelle Accounting or Justelle Bookkeeping if I really wanted to enable that to do it. And then I could form it almost like an umbrella company all under the same Justelle thing. I could have it all on one website with different pages, different services and so forth if I really wanted to. But consider, have you got legs in that if you want to extend out? Or do you specifically want to be really tight in and niche because actually that makes more sense for your business for the immediate term anyway? And consider, is it emotional? Does it resonate with your audience? You know, so some of those ones on the previous slide will resonate. They'll make you laugh. They'll make you cross. They'll make you cry. They'll just make you want to curl up and die, quite frankly, as one of them was. But does it have the right emotional link to your customers? And this with a CIC is really, really important. I would suggest thinking again if the spelling is challenged, difficult, hard. There was a wool shop in Yeovil that called itself Woolly Wonders, and it had a typo. It had too many L's because they'd typed it wrong. They typed it deliberately wrong to be funny, but all it did was make people think that it was spelt wrong, that the sign writing was wrong. So it had a negative effect on them. Be really, really careful with competitors' names. As a CIC, you won't get away with it. And we'll talk about trademarking and a bit about constraints around the IPO at the end. But be careful of copycatting because there are a lot of people out there who will come after you. There used to be a brewery in Yeovil called Yeovil Ales, and their best-selling beer was called Stargazer, one word. Down in Devon, a new microbrewery set up, calling itself Stargazer Brewery. Gap between it, Star, one word, Gazer, the second. Yeovil Brewery, who had Stargazer as its best-selling beer, successfully sued and got a cease and desist for that brewery, and that brewery had to change everything for all its beers that it sold out, all its sign writing on its vans, its draymen, everything, all its contracts. So whilst copycatting can be clever, be really, really careful with it, because if it's too similar, people will come after you. And particularly when you're successful, they might not care when you're turning over £10,000 a year or whatever, but the minute you get noticed and you get big, this is when they'll start coming after you, by which time consider the cost, the psychological cost, the emotional cost of having to change something that you've been working in for maybe 5 or 6 years. Be careful if it limits growth, if it's annoying, it's got a hidden meaning, if it's just a bit blah, bit tame, bit meh. You know, if it's uninspiring, people will just ignore it. My bit, but when I was trying to name my company, was the curse of knowledge. Only insiders get it. Be careful of that as well, because that can alienate people. And be careful if it's hard to pronounce or not obvious. You know, we've all probably seen the Hyundai adverts. I've had so many Hyundai cars and I've been pronouncing it wrong for about 20 years. So every day's a learning day when I see those adverts. But be careful as well, unless you can spin it into some clever marketing like they've done, and they've done it with a massive budget. Be careful if it's difficult to pronounce. So when you've taken that all into consideration, you've probably got a short list of maybe 3 or 4 different names that you're looking at. And then the next thing you need to do is you need to check the availability on it. So if you are looking for a limited company, you need to check on Companies House for the company name availability. These will all be on the slides when you get sent them, okay? So don't feel you need to write them down. If it's available on Companies House, the next thing you do is you check your domain. And I suggest using one of those 3. They're the 3 top ones. Because what you don't want is your company name to be available on Companies House, but you can't get the domain for it. So your website is something totally different and your emails don't follow. It's about that consistency. You also need to check, if you're setting up as a CIC, for any restricted terms. So when I was setting up Chambers of the Chamber one, I couldn't use the term Chamber of Commerce because Chamber of Commerce is a restricted term, as is Chamber of Trade, which is why we went for Yeovil and District Chamber CIC. So we're referred to as Yeovil Chamber, but you can't have Chambers of Commerce and you can't have Chambers of Trade. They are restricted and you have to get permission from the British Chambers of Commerce to use that terminology in a company name. And then you also need to look at the IPO and check for any trademarks or trademark applications that use terms or words in your company name. Because the company might be available on Companies House, but if someone's registered a trademark for one of those terms or names or for a restricted part of that practice, then you will have a £10,000 fine for infringing that trademark. And when you're starting a business, no one wants a £10,000 fine. When you're finishing a business, no one wants a £10,000 fine. But these are the steps that you must do for your due diligence. So, Zoe, you've been going through and you're working as a community group. You've probably given yourself a name. You've probably not even thought of any of this. Be prepared that if you're in that similar situation, you may have to change your name or alter it slightly. Okay. It's important that you check Companies House first and your domains second, and then you do the other 2 checks as well. Okay, particularly if you're going to be a CIC. So the last thing you want is your £50,000 grant that you wanted to spend on new play equipment for the local primary school and nursery to suddenly be taken up in fines from HMRC and the IPO. It's not a cool way to start. So how do you actually register a company? Now, some of you might have done this already and some of you won't have done. Okay, there are various different ways of doing it. You can use a self-serve option. So when I've set up mine, I've used a company called Formations Direct. There are loads of companies like that. Formations Direct is the one that I've found is easy to use. I set up a lot of companies for clients, so I have an account with them, which means I get good pricing. It costs about £80 to set up a limited company using them, and they provide you with all templates of all your documentation, your memorandums and so forth, ready for you to customise for your own usage. You could use an accountant, and accountant's fees can vary from about £400 to about £4,000, depending on your share agreements and different sort of structure that you might want, how many directors. But a typical price for an accountant to set up a company for you is probably somewhere around £800, and you'll probably pay VAT on that. But they will make sure everything is set up for you. They'll normally set up your QuickBooks or Xero accounting system. They'll probably also help you with your insurance and things like that and set up your bank accounts for you, all as part of that fee. If your business model is particularly complex, it is worth paying the accountants to do it for you. If you are a single person business, or maybe there's 2 of you, and you are doing something that's really straightforward, you're running a marketing business like I am, then there's an argument that says the self-serve option could be a good option for you. It also depends on your own capacity to do these things or your own capability as well. So you've got to know that you can fill in the forms. Some people are better at forms than others. They're not onerous, but they are methodical and you need to go through the process. Irrespective of whichever option you choose, you need to know some certain things before you register your company. Oh, and by the way, some solicitors will also set up companies and CICs for you as well. Again, if the shareholders agreements or you're tying it in with trademark application or something like that, okay? You need to know the name of your company, obviously, because you can't register just a random company. You need to know details about any directors and shareholders, dates of birth, addresses, any other directorships that they have. And when you're looking at other directors, search for them on Companies House to see if they've had previous directorships, if their companies have gone into liquidation, if they've got bad credit or anything like that. It might feel really, really awkward because it might be your brother-in-law or something like that. But if you're setting up as a CIC, it's imperative you know their history, because you can be rejected your CIC if there is bad credit in any of your directors or if they've got a track history of doing strange things. From a limited company point of view, you take it on advisement, but it's part of your due diligence checks. Okay, it might be that you know that your brother-in-law, your other director, had problems with his first company, but you also know that that was down to the other director he had at the time. That's fine, but do those checks. Before you register your company, you also need to know how you're going to manage your shares. Are you doing a single share at £1, or are you having a complex share portfolio? Are you going to both be, if there's two of you, 50-50, if there's four of you, 25% each, or are you going to have a majority shareholder who's got overall control of your company? These are all important things you would need to know before setting up. Obviously, we've mentioned if you're a CIC, you need to know about your asset log. So you need to know the details of that company or organisation or charity. And then the other thing that you need to know is your CIC, your SIC code. Don't ask me what SIC stands for. I can't remember off the top of my head now, but it basically tells you about the nature of business that you're in. And every nature of business has a code associated with it. It's a 5 or 6 digit code. 28153, I think, is consultancy. And you can have multiple SIC codes attributed to your business. So for mine, it's basically all marketing, all business consultancy, excluding financial, because I'm not a financial advisor. And if I clicked financial, I'd need to also be registered with the Financial Standards Agency. And I don't want that hassle, quite frankly. But you need to look at your SIC codes, because when you register your company, if you do it yourself online, you'll need to do this. If you're getting an accountant or solicitor to do it for you, they need to be extremely clear on what you're doing. If you register your business and you miss out a code or you put the wrong code, legally you can't trade in that nature of business. I don't know who enforces it, HMRC probably, but you can't trade under that. It also can affect, if you get to that stage or if you have premises, your business rates as well, because there are different business rates for different sectors of business. You also need to decide before you register your company whether you want to be VAT registered or not. If your turnover is £84,000 or above, or £85,000 or above, you have to be VAT registered. If you think you're going to hit that in the first 12 months, it's worth doing. If you've got high expenditure, rent, computers, if you're going to be buying a lot of stuff that's got VAT on it, it could be worthwhile. It's worth talking to an accountant to work that out. And that's the same if you're a CIC as well. You need to be mindful of the VAT limit, because that affects every business irrespective of its legal entity. So the message on this slide is be prepared. have all your stuff sorted out before you log on to do this, or before you engage an accountant or solicitor. Because if you go in with only half the information, your accountant will ring you up and ask you the questions, and then they charge you for that phone call. It's worth having a sheet of paper in front of you. It's worth going through the process online to find out what they ask you, so that you make sure you've got the questions. There is loads and loads and loads of help on the government website on how to set these up, and there's guides that you can download as well, which are really, really useful because it gives you all the questions you need to look at. And I would say if you're registering and you're looking at your SIC codes, this is an example where more is better. Okay. So you've got a company, you've got a name, you've got everything set up, you've got your bank account, and you're just about to cut the ribbon on the front door. So now what you need to do is you need to market your new company. Okay, and the first thing you need to look at is those goals that we spoke about at the beginning. The ones that you've clearly identified and have understood as your primary objectives and the purpose for your business, because these are what need to be conveyed across your website, your social media, your print, your brochures, everything. So you need to consider with your website whether it's an e-commerce platform, whether it's just a lead generation tool, an information site, or a combination of all the three. And we're going to talk about customers, and for the purposes of a CIC, these can be customers, but they can also be donators. Okay. Now, depending on those goals, depends on the complexity of your marketing and depends on whether you actually need a website or not. There's an argument that says everyone should have a website so that you're found on Google, so that you get part of that competitive shop window. However, if you're a small CIC or a small limited company, you might start out with really strong social media platforms, or if you're selling a product, you might be on Etsy or Amazon or Shopify or one of those other platforms who take away your need to spend out on a website and manage that website. You need to consider your target audience. Okay, so again, we're going back to that whole research that you did right at the beginning and looking at your target audience, their demographics and their online behaviours. And you need to determine the key features and functionality. If you're having a website, what do you need it to do? Is it online sales? Is it a contact form? Is it a donations button? Does it manage a newsletter subscription service for you? Can you book an appointment online? And the best way to do this is to look at your competitors, if you have them, and see what they've done, find out what works really, really well. And when I'm building websites with clients, I ask them for 5 websites they love from any sector, and I ask them for 5 that they hate, because that will tell you what doesn't work. Quick question in the chat, what's best.com or .co.uk? It really doesn't matter anymore, Julia. Not at all, not in the slightest. Used to, doesn't anymore. And the database I set up, it's not a database, it's a company called Formations Direct. Okay, and that's who I use to set up companies, but there are lots of other ones available. So we've answered this, we've got to know what our goals are, we know our audience a bit, and we know our market. So the next thing we do is we look at creating a customer persona. Okay, and this is to help us narrow down who we're trying to talk to with our marketing and with our messaging. These are the people we want to engage with our CIC or limited company. And what we look at is, what are their goals? What are their demographics? What are they looking at? What are their behaviours? Okay. And this is about the only part of business where you can make generalizations and be a bit politically incorrect. And you do this behind the scenes. You don't share this political incorrectness, but we have to make judgments based on grouped features. Okay, we have to make generalisms, because otherwise we're trying to target too many individuals. So we've got Flora and we've got James, who want different things. James just wants to buy something and get out of where he is. Flora cares about the environment and has got ethical considerations and green credentials that she wants us to take into account. Depending on your business, depends on what comes up when you look at your people. And these customers, like I say, for a CIC could be donators. So when you're building your marketing, your website, your social media, your leaflets, your brochures, your shop window, you need to consider the motivations of your customers. If I had £5 for every one of my customers that said, oh, I don't like social media, I wouldn't actually probably have to run a company at all. But the simple truth is, it doesn't matter what you like, it's what your customers or donators like that matters. So even if you hate Facebook more than you hate Marmite, if your customers are all on Facebook, then you should be, because that's the purpose of you running a business. Incidentally, I love Marmite more than Facebook, but I run a marketing company, so it's a necessary thing. It's important that you look at who these customers are, and I suggest that you try and come up with a minimum of 3 personas for your customers or donators, because you will not have one person as a customer unless you are something like Leonardo Helicopters or EDF. You don't have one type of customer, you have multiple. And you have multiple engagements with your community, with the wider business sector, with your chambers of commerce, with your councils, with your competitors as well. Okay, so you need to look at multiple people. And one of the best ways of doing this is if you're a CIC and you're looking at a group set up, is look at the people who've already bought in and said they want to be volunteers. Because they might be demographic, they might not be, they might be demographic of your customers. Look at your competitors and who they're selling to, because if you're doing the same thing, you probably want to steal some customers from them. But you have to go through this process of looking at your customer personas, and actually it's quite good fun. When you've got these personas together and you think, okay, I know who these people are, look at their behaviours as the key thing. Understand why they do what they do, and that will come up with your what we must and what we must not do. So as you can see, for James, we must clearly show what the features are on each product because he wants to do things quickly. We need to really easily provide comparisons between products, and we need to show him relevant offers. So we'll need some tracking on our website to know what he's looking at, what the algorithms show him next. What we don't want to do is put him off with lots of fluffy descriptions on products and don't give him too much choice, because he just wants to get in there, buy it, get out. Flora, on the other hand, wants to do a bit more research. She wants to go through things. She wants to make sure that she's got every choice there. So on the face of it, they totally conflict. But if we were selling shoes to both of them, we would probably build the men's shoes pages if we assume that James was demographic of men and Flora was demographic of women. We might have our pages structured differently. We might have that information presented in a different way. And you also need to consider what devices, if it is online, that they're using. Are they looking on their phones? Are they looking on tablets? Are they looking on desktop computers? Are they looking at print stuff? Because they're like my mother and still doesn't know how to send a text message if her life depended on it. You know, where are they and what do you need to produce for them? When we've got that, we take them through a series of steps whilst we build our content. So we will take Flora and we'll say, okay, what's going to make Flora aware of us? Okay, what's going to make it jump off the page and her go, oh, that's new, haven't seen that before? What's going to make her feel something when she sees our advert, our brochure, our sign, our website? When we've nailed that with that content, we then need to go, what's going to make her think more about it? So we know she's interested because she's visited the website a couple of times now. She's aware of us. How do we move her through that consideration part? How do we get to the point where we know that she's ready to buy and make a decision? And this is all done with our content. So it's very easy for people when they're marketing, and we'll just say on social media, to send out short, sharp things. Did you know we did this? Did you know we did that? Did you know we did this? You're very good at the awareness stage, but not giving people enough information to make a considered choice. So you need to mix your marketing and your content up. You need to have something that says, did you know this? And it might be find out more here, and you send them to a page on your website. Or it might be that on Twitter or X, you do really short did you knows, but on LinkedIn or Facebook, depending on where your customers are, you do slightly longer pieces that say, did you know we did this? And the reason we do this is here, and here's the process we go through, and this is how it could benefit you. It's all about taking people through that stage. So once you have your persona, you need to work through that journey with them. If Flora was walking through a figurative high street, what would be the points that she would stop at? And these are called moments of truth. And these are bits where, if you like, someone's going along and they've got a choice to go yes or no. And these moments of truth are really, really important. And there's two different theories behind this. One is that we should minimize the moments of truth so that they reach their buying decision sooner, and we take away choice. So we guide them down the path that we want them to go to. And the other is we should give them more moments of truth, more chances to make a decision, because we're giving them more information. So we're tying them in with our story more. Depending on your business, depending on your CIC, you will find the right one for you if you go through this process. But moments of truth are incredibly important. And if you can map those by doing your market research, doing focus groups, doing questionnaires, and finding out from people what made them not buy from you or not donate to you, as much as what made them actually buy or donate to you, then you can work out which moments of truth are the really important ones, and that will streamline your content as you go through. But this isn't stuff that you can do from day one. This is stuff that you will learn over the first 1 month, 1 year, 10 years. And it constantly evolves because our customers change. None of us are the same people we were 5, 6 years ago. And our decision-making processes will change. So if you're looking at a website, Google, you have to play to the customer, but you also have to play to Google so that you're found on the algorithms. So Google wants it to be technically sound. And this is why, if you can afford it, it's always worth getting a web company to help you build your website. I don't build websites. This isn't a sales pitch. I don't want to build websites. It's fine. But you need to have them technically sound so that they are found, they're mobile friendly, they're stable, they have minimal downtime. The bit then you affect is this engaging and unique content. And unique is important. It needs to be fresh, it needs to be updated regularly, it needs to be useful, informative, and interesting. And it needs to require your reader to interact with you. You don't want them just viewing, you want them to do something, to donate, to buy, to comment, to share. And then you might consider links. So for a limited company selling shoes, this might be some of your shoe suppliers. Pick the ones that boost your reputation and boost your authority. If you're a CIC, this is hugely important that you engage with the right other community interest companies, social enterprises, charities, ambassadors, colleges, could be the shops in the town. But you have to choose the right ones. They have to share your ethos. It can't just be, let's see how many people we can get on this page. For your CIC, these people share what you are trying to do. They advocate for you. They boost you by association. And then the holy grail is reviews, either on site, publish them, or on external reviews, Google My Business, TripAdvisor, all sorts of Facebook reviews. When you get a good review, publish it, share it, respond to it by saying, thank you so much, glad you had a really great experience. When you get a bad review, respond to it quicker and say, I'm really sorry you felt like that. Please, can you give me a ring so that we can discuss how to make this better? It takes 10 good reviews to outweigh one bad review, but your response to that bad review can change whether it's actually perceived by readers as bad or not. Now, a lot of the comedians do these stints, don't they? Where they read out, there was one, I think Joe Lycett does some huge ones, doesn't he? Where he reads out these reviews, and one of them was an Indian restaurant, and this bloke said that he'd been really sick, and he said, well, if the Indian restaurant owner responded, well, if you hadn't come in here drunk with 3 particular type of women of the night on your shoulder, maybe you'd have taken more attention to what you'd ordered and blah, blah, blah. You know, don't be confrontational. Don't be something that a comedian's going to use in the future when they've trolled through and seen your answer to your review. Be genuine, because your review will have a bigger effect on your reputation than all your other marketing put together. Right. So we look at user intent. So we need to have a look at Google, and we need to be found by the search engines. So Google, Bing, Moz, you know, all Firefox, whichever search engine it is, we're looking at user intent, search intent. So are they looking for you online for information? Are they looking for a specific website, or are they looking with an intent to purchase? They don't know anything. So we've got some examples here. And then we've got some types of content in the third column for you to consider. If you're giving something away, information, how do you change a plug? How do you fix a blocked drain? Video is a really good medium to use for your content. Blog post, step-by-step guides, in-depth reviews, you know, really responding to those questions that you get asked on social media. Not thinking, oh God, why am I giving all away for free? You kind of have to give something away for free when you start out. If you're being searched by your name, because you've got your name absolutely right, then you need to make sure that your homepage, so if I click in B&Q, it goes to DIY.com, it goes onto the homepage, and it's brilliant. You need to make sure that page is the best landing page. Your website, your Facebook page is your shop doorway, and it's the window that drags people in. If they're looking for something like cheap central heating system, then you want to have pages, service pages, sub-pages of your website that are dedicated to these things. So if you're a CIC, it might be you have a separate donations page, a stakeholders page, a how to get involved page, a projects page, those sorts of things. They're things that people are going to search for with an intent behind it, to purchase, to donate, to find out more. Now, all of this can be costly, but it will make a difference to your business if you get it right. So this is a bit of a checklist for creating powerful content. Okay, these are the 12 points for you to consider as you're writing your content. Always, always, always make sure it's relevant. Don't waffle on your website just to fill up space, just to get to your 300 words. One, it puts off people who are reading it because they think that they know that it's irrelevant. They're not stupid, but also it puts off the search engines. So Google has, it's called the World Wide Web, right? Google has spiders, bots that crawl the page, okay? And I can't do this without doing the hand movement. So they crawl across the page and they say, oh, is this relevant? I'm on a page here for a Chamber of Commerce, and all of a sudden there's something about selling gas central heating boilers. It's not relevant, therefore I'm going to blacklist that whole page. Doesn't make sense to the spider. It's just reading an algorithm. It's just reading things randomly and picking out keywords at random. So make sure it's relevant. Don't jump about too much, and don't put irrelevant stuff on a page. If I wanted a page on my Chamber of Commerce thing that says about heating engineers, I'll have that in my members directory perhaps, or on my YouTube channel or something. But make it relevant. It should always be clear to understand. Don't use industry jargon. Unless you're selling to other people in that industry. Don't use anything that confuses the reader, because the minute we feel confused, we click off, don't we? Try and make it engaging and compelling, make it original, Talk about value. Don't talk about cost. Talk about value and talk about benefits. How is what you're doing benefiting the community, benefiting your customer, benefiting the wider audience? It's all about value. Be emotional. You know, don't go over the top, but there's a saying, isn't there? We won't remember what we've done or who said what, but we remember about how it makes us feel. So use that. It's really important. Get that emotional connection and make sure that you focus on that user. When you've done your personas, you are talking to that user every single time. When I go on your website, I want to feel like you are just talking to me. When you go on my website, I want you to feel that everything is about you. That's what we want. We're selfish, we're vain people. Make it visually attractive, but pretty websites don't sell things. They have to work correctly as well. And then again, particularly for CICs, but also for your limited companies, make sure you've got that trustworthiness, you've got your credibility. If you've got accreditations, put them on there. If you'll put your company numbers on, that's a legal requirement, but make sure that you have got everything listed on there. So if someone's not on mute, can I just ask whoever it is to mute? Thank you. I was getting a bit of feedback. Have a call to action on each page. Read more, donate here, sign up for our newsletter here, buy now, see our offers, those sorts of messages. Calls to action are expected and they're important because you won't move people through this buying stage. Your SEO optimization, there's loads of cool tricks. If you go on to Google and say best SEO, organic SEO words for my business, it will give you some tips. So go on there. Look at things like there's a cool website called answerthepublic.com, and that will give you the best performing search terms for the last 90 days. It's free for 3 searches per day, so you have to kind of space it out a little bit. And I'm going to go back to my biggest bugbear: be consistent with everything you do across all your platforms. Be consistent. Make sure that it's high quality, it's valuable, and it's always on brand. The key message is you need to deliver the right content to the right people at the right time. Okay, it's 50% the skill that you bring into it and 50% luck, because you can't guarantee that that right person is receptive at that right time. But what you can do by going through your personas and mapping all of that out, doing all the research that we've spoken about in this second half, is have a better guesstimate of when that was likely to be. And that's really important. You can have the best website in the world, the best social media, the best company, the best CIC, but if your person isn't receptive, they won't buy, just irrespective almost of anything you do. And you have to accept that in business and go, okay, well, I've just got to keep trying. So one of the biggest skills that you bring to this is your determination and your tenacity. Okay, and just be a bit realistic. It's going to take a while sometimes. So pulling it all together, know your audience, know your product, research what the search engines are doing, understand that you have 6 seconds to make the best first impression, be consistent, be authentic, particularly if you're a CIC, choose the best sort of help for your audience, update everything regularly, evolve and grow, and please, 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 please don't rely on ChatGPT and other AI tools to do it for you, because they are searching what everybody else is doing worldwide. They will not know your company like you know it. They will not know your customers like you know it. Use AI like you'd use Google to do research. Absolutely use ChatGPT to go in and say, give me 10 suggestions for social media posts around a new social enterprise that is providing play equipment for children's schools. But please don't copy and paste, because Google will blacklist you. They will give you bad points, and you don't want bad Google points. You want good Google points. Okay, so please don't rely on AI to do it all for you. When you go on any of the AI engines, it says we might be wrong. Please don't rely on us for anything that's important. It's probably the most truthful bit of information that ever comes out of them, but they are really useful for ideas. But don't rely on them. How are we doing for time? We've got plenty of time. That's good. So intellectual property. What is intellectual property? It changes depending on where you're trading. So if you are trading in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, this is applicable. If you're trading in Southern Ireland, Scotland, anywhere in Europe or the rest of the world, there will be different rules. So make sure you check the rules for where you are trading. The most common types of intellectual property that are known are patents, copyrights, trademarks, and we're going to talk about trade secrets as well. Okay. The main purpose of intellectual property law is to encourage the creation of a wide variety of intellectual goods for consumers. So they're trying to almost build like a data bank of lots and lots of stuff that people can draw on, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can apply to use somebody else's information or trademark. But it's the purpose that we're speaking to it is, imagine you come up with the best idea and you've invented this new widget that's going to revolutionize everything. And you're talking to your mate down the pub or at the gym or fishing or at the cricket or wherever you happen to be. You say, come up with this good idea. Can I just run it past you? And someone overhears you, because your mate wouldn't do the dirty on you. Absolutely not, because mates never, ever do that. But someone 2 rows back behind you at the football, here's what you're talking about. That's a bloody good idea. I'm going to look into that. And because they've maybe got a bit more time or a bit more money or a bit more impetus or a bit more something behind them, they go ahead and they register this before you do. For those of you that watch Dragon's Den, Deborah Meaden is always saying, so what do you own? What have you got protected? This is what she's talking about. This is the bit that stops someone else copying what you're doing. Now, for some of us, so for me with the Chamber of Commerce, it doesn't matter, because what I'm doing is for the community. It doesn't matter to me whether someone copies it, because in theory, they're copying it for the good of their community. But in my business, I might want to trademark certain aspects of it. I might write a course that I want to trademark and protect so that no one else can take my training materials. I can't train Laura, for example, and Laura go, no, I'm a marketing professional, I'm going to train that. Laura would never do that, but I might want to protect that. And that's what we're talking about here, is intellectual property. And it can be on goods or services. So it's things like copyrights, trademarks, patents, and its ideas. And you can't just put the little C in a circle at the bottom of your training materials and go, it's copyrighted now. You have to go through a whole process to do it. And I'm just going through it at the moment. And on my board behind me, I know I've just gone out of focus. I've got a letter here, which is talking about the trademark that I've applied for my company. And it's in a stage at the moment where it took 2.5 weeks for them to say, yeah, okay, you filled in all the details that we think you need to. We've provisionally said there's no other trademark pending that is going to infringe on this. Now we go into a 2-month opposition period where anyone could object to it. If someone does object to it, it will be extended by another 3 months whilst they investigate. If no one opposes my trademark, then I'll get it within 2 weeks of that date. So in theory, we're looking at sometime around the end of March, beginning of April, if no one objects to my trademark application, which is basically for my company name and for some training materials I've written. Why am I doing that? There's the enemy within and the enemy without, okay? The enemy within, when you start a business, could be the person you decide to go into business with. It could be an employee. So you might ask everybody who comes on board to sign an NDA with you. You might put in restricted covenants, which is very common in legal and financial services. If you leave a particular law firm, you might not be able to trade within a so many mile radius for such amount of time. Okay. You might look at other colleagues, people you talk to within your business. So it could be other clients. You know, you've got quite friendly with a client, you're having a chat, you're telling them about something another one of your clients is doing. And they go, that's a good idea. So there's lots of different enemies within. NDAs are really good, restricted covenants. The enemy without is anyone else who knows what you're doing. So it's this guy 2 rows back at the football that's overheard a conversation. It's Bob at the pub who you've just decided to ask to help you or go through. It's a colleague at the job that you're in at the moment who said, you saying, I'm thinking of leaving and setting up my own business doing this. What do you think? The only way you can stop that enemy without is to keep your mouth shut and pick who you talk to really, really carefully. But look at things, go to the intellectual property office. Like I said, when we were looking at your names for your companies, and check the pending trademarks list, put in the terms that you're thinking of doing and the products you're looking at selling, and any names that you've decided to call your products or your services or your training course, and just see if someone's using them already. Because if someone is, and you go ahead, you will be the person that ends up with the massive fine and the cease and desist and having to change everything that you're doing. So if you go in there and you find out that no one else is doing it, it's not listed, it's not pending, consider, is it important enough to your business for you to trademark it? It costs £170 to trademark one term, to trademark something in one category. If you pick an extra category, so I've trademarked my company name under marketing. That cost me £170. That's the application it's in at the moment. I also wanted to have it covered under business consultancy in this box here. It came under a different section, so 38 and 45, I think they were. So I paid £50 to do that one as well. It's not hugely expensive. It's a very, very quick form to do once you sort of consider what you're trying to do and why. It is worth considering if what you're doing is mission critical, and if someone else copied it, whether that could cause the end of your company or CIC. Okay, but have a look into that as well. It is worth looking into. NDAs, there are standard templates that you can get from ACAS, from the FSB, Federation of Small Business, or from numerous other sources. Make sure they're UK law or relevant to the country you're operating in, and you can have a mutual NDA. And it's very important that it's mutual. One-way NDAs are not enforceable in law, because it's basically you saying you must agree to my terms or else. If you're doing it mutually, it's a contract that's exchanging. Right, so we've looked at different legal entities, we've gone through naming, we've looked at pros and cons of different types of names, types of entities, we've looked at how to reach the audience, and we've gone really, really quickly on to intellectual property. Now, I've gone through this a lot quicker than Sally expected, because Sally's always laughing at me for waffling and going on and overrunning. So I've possibly gone through this very, very quickly. There aren't any other questions in the chat at the moment, but if Nikki stops the recording at this point, what I can do is open up the floor. You can take yourselves off mute and ask questions, and I'll try and answer as many as possible now.